Let me take a moment to introduce all of these amazing folks up here to all of you out there. First up, Kingsley Bachue II is a blessed and excited father of his amazing one-year-old son, Trey, who is the cutest I've seen on Facebook. He is a year into the beginning of his political career as the youngest member of the Iowa City Council. He is also the Director of Equity and Staffing for the Iowa City Community School District. You want to wave? Where are you? Right there? Awesome. After completing his education in the political schools of Monroe, Georgia, Michael Hill took his bachelor's from Howard and completed a master's and PhD at Harvard. He is a University of Iowa faculty member in English and African American Studies and teaches courses on Black literature, prize-winning celebrity and rap music. Along with his wife, Lena, he co-wrote Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, a reference guide, and he has also published The Ethics of Swagger, prize-winning African American novels, 1977 to 1993. Kendra Malone has been addressing issues of diversity and social justice for 10 years as a trainer, consultant, facilitator, instructor, speaker, and activist. Kendra is a diversity resource coordinator in the Chief Diversity Office at the University of Iowa. She holds a master's in cultural anthropology and women's studies and firmly believes that you have the skill and ability to turn the painful realities of racism into righteous action. Everyone, Kendra Malone. Roberts. She's a University of Iowa student and a member of the Feminist Union. She's studying cultural anthropology and French, and she is a co-president of the Feminist Union and a member of Black Hawkeyes Collective. Justin Roberson, a personal friend of mine who is from Chicago, senior and sociology major with a minor in African American Studies. He's heavily involved in the Hubbard Group and Alpha Phi Alpha. Tab Wiggins is a fourth-year University of Iowa staff member in residence education and co-advisor to the Herky Cares Project. She works tirelessly for social justice and equality on campus. I can attest to that. I've seen it. And in the Iowa City community as well. Tabitha Wiggins. I'd like to remind all of you that we want to hear from you throughout the rest of the event. We encourage you to ask questions. We have two mics, one located right here, and I'll be standing here. And then there should be another mic over here once we get started. If you have questions, you can come and make a line. They're pushed back a little bit. There they are. Right over there. So you can come up and line up with your question or comment, bringing in some more perspective and adding to the discussion. For those of you who may be a little bit on the shyer side and are somewhat technologically savvy, you can participate in this discussion by using your Twitter accounts. Please be aware that if your Twitter is not public, we won't be able to see it, but you can use the hashtag #BlackAtIowa, and you spell everything out, hashtag, and we will have someone watching that throughout the event and bringing those questions forward as well. Please make your questions and comments concise so we can hear from as many people as possible in the time that we have allotted. And now I will turn things over to our conversation participants. Thank you.
Good evening. You're going to have to help me out. Good evening. All right. It's been stated in the course of the speech that a laborer is worthy of his hire. If this is in fact the case, I would have to revert to my Southern roots and say, we ought to pay the man. Now, am I right? So one of the questions that arises in the context of a situation like this is, when the hired gun comes in to deliver a message of this sort, what are we as a community going to do with the message that we've been given? The eloquence that has been displayed before us is unassailable. But at the end of the day, the question becomes, how do you take the treasure that has been presented and transform it into an opportunity for community building? And one of the themes that emerges quite forcefully within the world of Brother Coates' remarks is the notion that truth-telling is a precursor to progress. One of the questions that needs to be posed both to the audience but also to my fellow panelists is, given the 835 students who are African American on the University of Iowa campus, out of a contingent of roughly 30,000, given the 3.2% of African Americans who constitute a small portion of the population in Iowa, how do we truly feel about being in a community that is a multicultural and a multiracial community? We give credence and lip service to the idea of participating within a multiracial community. But what I want to hear from the audience about, and what I also want to hear from my fellow panelists about, is what is the lived reality of an obligation to creating such a community? How do we feel about pulling away some of those myths that Brother Coates alluded to and beginning the process of truly telling one another how we feel about being in a project that is the collaborative building of a community?
I guess you're looking at me because you want me to start. Well, as a senior and as a black male, I can say, when you first get to Iowa as a black student, it's rough. And I came with 6 of my friends from the same high school. And so even then, I had it a little bit easier than some of the other students that I talked to and work with in student organizations and go to class with. One of the realities that kind of goes unsaid or unspoken about in official settings is that black men at the University of Iowa come and don't stay here long. And for me, that's problematic. Not only because I want to see people like me in my classes and at events and hang out with them because I can connect with them, but because the university needs to benefit from their opinions, their experiences, because I'm sure some of the students can tell me if I'm lying, y'all. We go to classes with people who've never seen black people. You laugh, but that's the reality. We were just this thing on TV that people would watch and listen to and sing along with. Oh snap, now he's in my class. And they make snide remarks and make class even harder to go to than it already is. So when you talk about some of the realities that's very true for me is that I've seen over 24 black males in 3 years go home. Not just because they didn't have the grades, but because they didn't have the support necessary to succeed at the University of Iowa. And that needs to change.
So a question that I'd like to pose to my colleagues up here, but then also that I would like to pose to the audience members is, when we think about supportive community, when we think about the classroom, the work environment, the community environments, all the environments that we interact in on a regular basis, what does supportive look like? What does affirming look like? What does that mean for us given the realities of, particular communities and populations at the University of Iowa campus, in the Iowa City community more largely, what does that look like? And how can we collectively think about what our responsibility is for creating those things? So I'm posing that question to folks. What does that look like for you? Do you have it sometimes? Do you have it none of the time? What is that for you so that we can begin to create and expand what that is so that we can all continue to, well, hopefully continue to thrive, but to deepen our ability to thrive and to meet the expectations of whatever we're doing?
All right, I'm just going to speak from my experience as a student here. I study cultural anthropology, and it's a really small major. At some point, I will have met most everybody in that program, and probably met almost all of the professors and TAs. It's supposed to be the study of human beings and their, my specialty is cultural, so their culture and all those different facets of it. And within that program, there are no Black professors, at least none that I've met. If they're out there, find me. And like part of the reality of my experience with this push for diversity in the university is that it's a push for diversity, but it's not the people who represent this diversity speaking for themselves. So it's been a lot of white professors telling me about myself, which is fine when they are competent, but another reality is that cultural competency is not common on our campus.
Is this on? Okay, perfect. So I would like to read a question from the audience, I'm assuming. Oh, you have a password on your phone. I can't see it anymore. Just joking. I'm going to ask a different question then first. What would, and this is for the participants up here, unless someone in the audience would like to answer, what would policies that begin to address reparations look like? Hashtag Black at Iowa.
So I get asked that a lot, and I have to remind people that I wrote the case for reparations and not a plan for reparations. And this is like important, right? And I promise I'll answer the question, but this is, well, first let me say what the immediate policy is. The fact of the matter is, since I believe it was 1988 or so, when reparations were given to survivors of Japanese American internment in this country, Congressman John Conyers out of Michigan has every year since introduced a bill that is based on the same bill that allowed Japanese American internees to receive reparations, and it calls for a study of enslavement, the periods coming out of enslavement, their subsequent effects, and what, if any, remedies there should be. This is the obvious first step. And so I think anybody with any interest in reparations has some responsibility to call their congressman and try to figure out why it is that under Democrats and under Republicans, this bill has never come to the floor. This is just a word on why it's never come to the floor. This is like the elephant in the room doesn't even classify. This is the monster. This is the thing that we're scared of. And the reason why I focused on the case for and not the plan is because most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, don't believe Black people are owed anything at all. At all. So even getting to a level, how would we, cut a check, who would get what, is putting the cart like 10 miles before the horse. No one believes you're owed anything. That's the first thing. And this is like really, really important because that belief undergirds the kind of performance art that sees people go on television or, go before, in public spaces and pretend as though the status of African Americans in this country is somehow mysterious. as my friend Jelani Cobb often says, the policy, of this country, since its founding, for the vast majority of its years, has been to affect failure in African American communities, and that policy has been very effective. There's just no way of looking away from that. It's no way to say, well, since 1619, up until 1968, if you're being conservative, it was our policy to support white supremacy. And that's incontrovertible. That's just true. That's just fact. No one would really dispute that. And then for 40 years, we allowed, people who did well in schools, who happened to be black, to go to places like the University of Iowa, and that should fix everything. There's no way to make that make sense. And the point of reparations really is to call that out, to say that our entire dialogue from left to right is totally wrong, that it's actually scared of something. And what it's scared of is that the African American experience in this country stands in direct contradiction to everything that this country says it is when it goes out before the world and advertises its adventures and what it's going to do. It questions everything. It makes it very, very hard for anyone to, accept the idea that we would launch a war solely for democracy. It has dire, dire implications for the very self-image. America is not a nation state in the sense that there's an ancestral group of people, who've been here for 1,000 years. The way the French constitute themselves as a nation state, as a French people, and there's some illusions about that, but, be that as it may. America's creedal. America's unity is built on the idea that, we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. And yet here you have, a living population with political power in this country whose experience stands in direct contradiction to that. And beyond that, whose experience without which, if you took it out of America, you could not have America at all. So that experience, that plunder, that destruction is actually essential to America's ability to, to go around and talk about being land of the free and home of the brave. It made it possible. That's a hard thing for a country to confront. And so when people, come to me and ask, so what's the plan for reparations? I think, you have no idea. You have no idea. It's like asking me, what's my plan for investment once I become a multimillionaire? Now, I hope to be a multimillionaire. I hope to one day even have a financial advisor who will, plot a path, to millionaire status. But right now, I'm trying to get my son out the house and figure out college. That's where we are. That's where we are. And so, to get into that conversation, I think, vastly overestimates the consciousness of the American people at this point in time.
All right, so if I could have that mic turned on, is it? They're testing it. Okay, why don't you try that mic over there?
Is it on now?
Hi.
Perfect. Do you have a question?
Oh, God, I hope I can keep this concise, as you say.
Please do.
First of all, Mr. Coates, there is an active cell of the KKK in Solon, which is about, 17 miles from here? So white supremacy ain't dead. It's alive and well, as I'm sure you know. The case for reparation, how about a new constitution? That's the only way that I can see any kind of fairness or social justice happening at all. The creative corridor, by the way, Spike Lee also doesn't think there's black people here, by the way. And for 20 years, young man, I'm sorry, I forgot senior's name. For years, I've been living with, what are you? So, because I'm Puerto Rican, so I'm really proud of my African heritage, but most people read me as other nevertheless. I've been living here in Iowa for about 20-some years, and I'm still a foreigner. For those who know me from the town, I'm a townie, and I can tell councilmen, I was there at town council meeting on Monday, I will never have coffee with a police person, especially when that police person has harassed me and racially profiled me, which is a condition of both Johnson County, Linn County, and the whole state of Iowa. it treats whites and black at twice the rate. Blacks at twice the rate than whites. It's been proven. You don't have that info? Go get it. So, I can't go on because I actually wrote like 3 pages of notes when you were writing. Seriously. As someone who has lived here for this long and having to face those problems for so long, you have no idea the anger and the frustration that I feel being passionate over something that I feel completely helpless about. Because I can call my congressman, but unfortunately, there's not equal representation. I mean, the basis of our Constitution right now was based on 12 civilized tribes, which had equal representation for each tribe. Now the only tribe being represented is the 1% in corporations who are now people.
All right. Panelists. Thank you.
And I appreciate those comments. She did speak at the council meeting as well, and I appreciate it at that time as well. You know, I actually have to thank or congratulate my panelists as well as Mr. Coates, just because I feel the anger and frustration that you feel. I actually didn't know what I was going to say, to be honest with you. And it's actually one of those things where, you know, people will ask me, have I watched 12 Years a Slave? And I'll say no, just because after watching that movie, or after watching movies like that, I tend to get really upset about, you know, not only the state of affairs, but, you know, just what I'm doing in the system or whatever work I'm trying to do in the system. So I'm shaking right now because of that, because I'm angry, and I think you make some very valid points that I didn't consider from a historical standpoint. But going back to the comments, you know, I agree, and I agree that you know, coffee with the cop, as well as I think it was even discussed ride-alongs with police officers. Even at the time of the meeting, we discussed it. Aren't a good idea. I saw it as an opportunity to get something done. Obviously, there's other things that I am proud of. There's a racial equity review tool that's a part of it, evaluating those things. There's other parts of that particular resolution that speaks to having people at the table now that have never been at the table. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. And so while I might have, you know, for that standpoint, voted for something in those particular points that you brought up that I might not have been proud of, because I haven't been on a ride along either and I don't plan on it. I did feel proud about certain in particular points that I think really will push the conversation forward. But I thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm speaking from the community, specifically Kirkwood Community College, and I'd just like to share that we're having similar issues, maybe better, maybe worse than what's going on at the University of Iowa. And I'd just like to share, well, first of all, one of my jobs at Kirkwood is to help promote diversity and inclusion. And for me, you know, I'm very conscious of this being a white male and how to get this going, and sometimes when I'm trying to reach out to students, there's a level of distrust, like, am I just selling something? I'm just doing this to get myself promoted or something. But I'd just like to share what's going on at Kirkwood right now. So our problem is we have a fair number of African American students, and our retention rate is 3%. So 97% of our African American students don't stay with us, and most of them leave within the first month. So we would like to support. How can we provide support? How can we help our African American students know that we have a good number of faculty and some staff that are willing to support, but they don't know about it. There's not enough communication to know how can we reach out and how can we connect with our students. Yes.
So, if I may, sir, respond. It kind of goes back to what Kendra asked earlier. What do support and resources look like? What does that look like, kind of? I'm going to go right back to my students, my fellow classmates. It looks like the student organizations that we've started, and we kind of have to connect the dots with those, right? So I'm a part of the Hubbard Group. It's a kind of a black male safe space, but also a forum for discussion surrounding black male issues for not even just University of Iowa students, but the community as well. We got BSU in the house. I know NAACP is in the house. I have some other Greeks in the house. I see some Noble Shade members in the house. All these student organizations and student leaders, well, most of the student leaders are my peers, first of all. Like my friends, kind of like Kyra is, we don't just struggle with getting other students out or getting them aware that we're here to support them, but we struggle getting resources. So when it's time to find UISG funds or Cecil funds, because MPHC is consolidated into one organization, we're not going to be able to get as much funding from UISG or Cecil as one particular fraternity or sorority because they're one group. So there's kind of a cap system with that. And then you talk about, promotion and flyers and things like that, all the things that we talk about every week when we meet or when we're having our planning meetings. How do we get over those issues? How do we get the university to send out emails, more than one email a semester for a student group to let them know, hey, we're here? How can you get the kid out of his dorm room with an email invite to go to BSU if we only got one mass email a semester? So we kind of struggle with getting the same students there and the same people in the room, but we need the different people in the room who weren't able to make it to those meetings, who missed the first email because they got 15 other emails about joining the fencing club and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all these other great things that the university has to offer. Like, we get overshadowed. And that's pretty much what happens, and you'll end up with 10 or 15 students at every student organization, but there are 835, you said? I don't know any black student organization that has more than 24 members. That's problematic. And so it looks like strengthening those organizations, not just financially, but also making sure that those students who identify with those communities are able to be reached and can get to the meetings.
I'm always really curious about those kind of questions, like this is happening to black students, so, and then the question is like directed to black people who are affected by these same things that are being questioned. And that's a lot of intellectual labor to put on a group of people who are already experiencing that. So I think when you ask those questions, like what should be done, like it's sort of a kind of a curse of knowing, of being aware of the structure of some of these systems that people then turn around and think you have the answers. Like Mr. Coates wrote the case for reparations, but people come with then what's the plan? I don't think it really works that way. You can't be a victim of that system and then be expected to be the labor that fixes the system.
Okay, really quickly, I just want to remind all of the panelists to not drop so many acronyms. There's people in the audience that don't know what BSU means.
Black Student Union. Black Student Union.
Correct, so just be cognizant.
Before you step in, sorry, give me 1 second. So I wanted to go back to what Kendra's initial question was, like what does support look like? I think it's very interesting that question is being posed again, and Naila illuminated it too, to students who are being victimized by a system, I think, in policies that are not there to support them. And I think I want to go back to the Ku Klux Klan statue. And I know, like, people are like, let's just move past that. Like, that's cute. Like, we're done with it. No, we're not. And so I think what that did was illuminate the lack of leadership, the lack of support for students. And so they began to kind of see that, yeah, we have NAACP, we also have BSU, but we don't have a convergence of all of those things. We don't have someone at the helm or a few people at the helm in policy-making positions and power to support those folks. And so when that situation happened, you know, I helped step in and everything, but I got another job, you know, like I did it out of the kindness of my heart. Dr. Hill, he has another job. Like who are the people that are there to support them in our structure as a university? We lack that. I think that is a gap in our services, definitely. And so I think as we're looking at support, we need to take an assessment of what we look like, how we are supporting those students, and then build upon that. And that is something that, you know, the AAC is looking at. You know, that's something that is coming out of conversations that I'm having with students. You know, you think about the support for them. The Afro House is on the west side of campus. There's not a bus that goes there, but it's on the west side of campus. So students don't go visit that place, right? And I think historically it was made so that students could have fellowship in that space. But how many students really utilize that? How many students support our black athletes who are 20% of our black population, right? Where are their voices? You know, this is on a night when we have a basketball game, and you know, some of our strongest black leaders are playing at the game, right? And so like there's some type of division that's there because there's no one there or not a group that's in place to support those students, and I think we definitely need to look at that. So
do I have to introduce myself? Okay, cool. Hey, I'm Yasmin Ruiz. I'm president of Black Student Union. I'm also a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And so going back to the question that he posed about the Kirkwood campus, which also relates to Justin's mention of retention, and a majority of it is black male students, although it does resonate to all people of color. I think the problem on both campuses is outreach, and like you said, people don't know. Like you answered your own question when you said they don't know. We don't know. We come in as incoming freshmen and we're hit with all this information. Go to CDE, go to CISO, go here, go there, go there. But when the problems arise, where do we really go? Who do we really talk to? Who are we comfortable with? We're not, because we're freshmen and we don't know anybody here. Justin was lucky enough to come in with 6 people from the same high school. Some people aren't lucky enough to come with someone from the same city. They're by themselves. We don't have support from our family because we're here by ourselves, because we're here for a reason, to get that degree. So when you talk about what can we do as administrators, you reach out because we don't really know where to go. You learn that along the way. I was fortunate enough to learn that along the way, meeting people like Roy from CISO, Professor Hill, who's been amazing. Like you're lucky enough if you meet these people and you continue those relationships, but not many people are. You said within the first month. That's because they don't know anything. That's because they're here, but they don't have anyone else behind them. And so you come in the first week and you have to continue those relationships. You have to get them involved with other students, with other faculty, even with people in the community so that they feel comfortable staying there. And yeah, I'm done.
Hi, my name is Cora. I work at the Iowa United Nations Association. Our headquarters are here in Iowa City. And I have a question that's kind of multi-pronged. One is that we're talking about being black at Iowa in the context of living, as one of the panelists said, in a multicultural community. And I'm curious, so I'm Chinese American, I'm Jewish, I'm a woman, and these are all demographics that are also trying to fight institutionalized oppression. And I'm wondering if people here on campus feel like, how do you feel about collaboration with other groups that are also trying to fight institutionalized oppression? How do you feel it's gone in the past? And what are your ideas for future collaboration? What's your idealized version of collaboration? We have Chinese student associations, we have Indian student alliances, we have all of these different organizations on campus and in the community. How can we work together? And I'm more interested in thoughts, ideas, brainstorms. I don't want to do that thing that we were just talking about where I'm asking you to come up with a plan for support, but just opinions. And the second part of the question is, it comes more from the part of me that's technically a white person in America. I think a lot of us have experienced as students, when I was in my freshman year here, people in Dom, where I lived, told me they'd never talked to a black person before. And for me, as a minority, that was alienating. And I can't even imagine what it would feel like as the black person to hear that. And I'm curious what you think the university can do, what sort of responsibility the university has to its white students, to us white people, to educate ourselves, to provide educational resources. I know gen eds are an option. There are a whole bunch of different routes that the university could take. So one, collaboration with other sort of demographics and other student groups, and two, options that the university could take.
Speaking for a moment to this question of the university's commitment to educating students in a 21st century world. This is where the rubber hits the road. We are contemplating the fate of higher education in a series of symposia across this university. We're thinking about distance learning. We're thinking about trying to compete with entities that have been at the online class game for longer than we have. We're thinking about MOOCs. We're thinking about all sorts of innovations with regard to turning this into a leaner, more profitable enterprise. We're thinking about how we can manage ourselves better so that we are able to produce an efficient time to degree. We just introduced a 3-year degree option. We have all kinds of commitments across the university to contemplating the mission of the university and what it is that the university should do. When you decide that you want a 3-year degree program, you have to implement a particular set of structures in order to achieve a 3-year degree program. If you decide that you want to have a culturally competent student body, you have to transform the curriculum that you're teaching that student body. If you say you live in a state that has a population where it's still possible, as Justin rightly says, for students to arrive on campus without ever having seen a black person before, then you need to treat your student body as if that's a reality. Don't start talking to them about Du Bois. Don't start talking to them about Booker T. Washington as if they will know who those individuals are. You have to operate from the assumption that they are bereft of any understanding of such a cultural tradition. And if you would like for them to have an understanding of such a cultural tradition, then you would take units like African American Studies on your campus and you will say, let's support them as deeply as we possibly can. You will take units and you will start classes so that people can study these things as an academic subject. Just as if you want people to understand physics, you send them over to the physics building.
All right, so we can also take questions regarding the Iowa City community as well. And we have a question specifically for our keynote here. How much of an influence, what kind, if any, has having a father who was a Black Panther been on your life?
It had a huge influence, and I don't think it was so much the fact that he joined the Black Panther Party. I think it was the fact that he was the kind of person that would join the Black Panther Party. By which I mean, my dad was and is just a great interrogator of American politics. There's a vision of America that's deeply hopeful, that is implicit in the civil rights movement, and that is that the founders of this country had certain ideals. They did not live up to those ideals, and now it's high past time that we as a country live up to those ideals, make the paper worth something. And then there's a different tradition that, is best represented by people like Malcolm X, for instance, which says that, as the great Bill Parcells once said, you are what your record says you are. And that is that the actions of this country effectively, say what this country is and has been, and that, the rhetoric isn't, doesn't mean much of anything. So, when you say, why aren't black people included in We the People, then the answer is they don't consider you people. And that's a cold, again, just a very, very cold way of looking at history. But it was the way I was raised. I was raised within that. I was not, raised to think that, as they say, the arc of history, the arc of the moral universe is long but bends towards justice. It bends all kinds of ways. And history shows that it bends towards injustice, very, very, very often. And so I think that reality, and this was all around me, I can remember, and not picking on the civil rights movement, but I can remember like being a child during Black History Month and the films that they would show us, these people, down south in Selma, in, different areas of the South, just in Birmingham, getting their heads kicked in, getting the crap beaten out of them. And, they would tell us about how great nonviolence was, and how all our heroes were nonviolent. And it was clear that most American heroes weren't actually nonviolent. There was nothing nonviolent about George Washington, for instance, or Thomas Jefferson. The people that, America considered heroes were not nonviolent. In fact, they were very, very violent. And that, nonviolence was a thing for us. Now that's separate from the moral question about nonviolence, which I think is a very real thing. So I don't want, anybody going away from here thinking I'm glamorizing. I'm not. That's just a serious, serious moral question. But it's not just a moral question for black people. It's a question for human beings, period. And so I'm saying all that to say that the Panthers, with their guns, sort of directly opposing that idea, sort of, directly confronting people, with the notion that racism, that white supremacy in all its manifestations is always violent. That there is no violent, non-violent manifestation of racism. That it can be, abstract and codified in things like redlining that I talked about, and job discrimination. These things that sound very sanitary, or very septic, but behind them is always somebody with a gun. In every instance, and that, sort of reality, being raised in that reality, being raised from that perspective, I think it altered my approach to writing, as a black person. It altered my approach to, I feel no need to be optimistic. I feel no need to give, anyone hope. My job is to tell things as I see them, and that can be right or wrong. I may be wrong about what I see, but I see no need to offer some, sort of moral at the end of the story, or tie everything up in a neat bow to make people feel good. It is what it is. We've had a long time, many centuries of feeling good, and I think that there are other values besides, feeling good.
If I could just quickly add something to expand on what you just said, I think so beautifully, is something that I want to put into the room, is that for me, from my perspective, I do diversity work professionally, and what I think I hear, what I've heard in the voices of people asking questions, what I've heard in the voices of my fellow folks up here, sharing their perspectives, is pain. Is the pain that has come through all of the history of oppression and racism, and all of the pieces that Mr. Coates has shared with us about that history of blackness in this country. And we have yet to find ways to talk about that pain in ways that validates it, lets it air itself out, lets it be ugly, lets it be violent, lets it be messy, in ways that then move us to a new place and thinking about how we create inclusive space. And so I think from my perspective, until we're able to have those conversations about pain and about cultural trauma and the way that racism and oppression has created pain for all of us, right? It's not just one kind of pain. The pain exerts itself in different ways, right? But that it's important for us to remember that this is painful stuff and that we need to find ways to create spaces for all of us to talk about and air that pain. Because at the end of the day, the reason why the students, the black students at Kirkwood are only lasting a month is because there's this pain that is hard to name and nobody's recognizing it and nobody's validating it and nobody's giving them support for how to heal that pain. And then recognizing their humanity. I think one of the other consequences of this history of oppression and racism is that we've lost sight of certain communities' humanity, and that we forget that you're human, and when we forget that people are human, that gives us room to devalue them and treat them like cattle. And so that is then a painful thing to experience, and therefore, as Mr. Coates has shared with us, now we have this history behind us, and now here we sit in these rooms trying to have conversations about what to do next, when really we need to talk about the pain that we are experiencing based on those histories.
Yes. Yes.
So what do we do?
Yes.
We just got it in there, and how do you restore it?
Yes.
It's frustrating. I know it is, and whatever.
Yes.
You can't teach someone these things, and like because I appreciate you explaining those things.
It's hard.
Now I have a lot of professional white friends that I could explain to because I guess I didn't look at slavery as a business, like you said, with cotton and all this stuff, and it is. It's just like wow, it's my world for these things.
Yes. 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 Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Thank you.
My question is, I guess, for the idea of truth-telling, the value of truth-telling, and the power of truth-telling. I'm a writer myself, so this is a question that I bump very violently up against again and again. And on some days, I feel very, very hopeful and very sure that the majority of the people at the helm of power in this country are able to be appealed to with truth and with facts and with a reality that perhaps they are not privy to and they don't know. And on days when I'm not so hopeful, I look at that hopeful person and think that that person is delusional, and that there's a very hard limit to truth, and that there's a very hard limit to people that are operating under rationality and people that are susceptible to hearing the truth. I think there's a very hard wall, and that there's a very big difference between simple ignorance and then another kind of gnarlier, more violent, kind of purposeful ignorance. And as a writer or a truth teller or artists and educators, I'm just wondering how one reconciles that, or how one addresses that or deals with that?
So I tend to more side with the former version of yourself that you gave. I think it's key to understand that the white supremacy in this country and racism in this country, and this is probably true of any other, I suspect it's true, I haven't done deep studies, but I really suspect it's true of any other form of oppression in this country, is not a form of insanity. It's not a form of madness. It's an interest. People have an interest in maintaining, they get things out of maintaining racism, and like you got to get that. There's a kind of theory that I think we on the left, those of us who are on the left, often use that attempts to escape this reality that white people who are racist are somehow acting in other people's interests, that they aren't acting in their own best interests, and that simply does not stand up to history. They are acting in their interests. It was racism that made, as I said, those housing policies, of the New Deal possible. Without racism, those things wouldn't have, been able to be. It was the racism after the Civil War in which people, forgot what the Civil War was over and what, people were fighting over that allowed this country to, achieve reunion again, and pretend that the Civil War was just, as James McPherson says, a violent football game, as opposed to having to dig into the mess of the actual reason for why 700,000 people died, the disgraceful reasons for why people died. It's an active interest. That's the reason why, when people are protesting down in Ferguson, you get people saying, I support, Officer Wills. Those people aren't crazy. They aren't crazy. They have an interest in, maintaining, a certain hierarchy, because the fact of the matter is, if there are no, excuse my language, niggers in America, what assurance of anything is there? There's no like ceiling. There's no floor through which, you can't tumble anymore. You can go as low as possible. One assurance that being not black in America guarantees is that you can never be a nigger. You will never have to give your kid the talk the way I have to give my kid the talk. There's an assurance of that. And that grants very, very real things. I mean, that's an interest, right? So if you can recognize that racism and white supremacy historically in this country have been interests, and they continue to be an interest even until today, then you have to say that some people have an interest in not knowing. And some people have an interest in being ignorant. Now that, obviously, I don't want to speak ill of anyone. And again, this is not, because people are white. In other words, it is not because they, have blonde hair or, straighter hair, or because they have less melanin or their eyes are red. That's not why. I suspect that, if we flipped it and put us in that situation, it'd be much the same way. When people are oppressing other people, there's an interest. They're doing it, for an actual reason. They're getting something out of it. And so, if people are determined to be ignorant, if they benefit from being ignorant, you have to understand that a certain percentage of them are just not going to be gettable. I hate to say it that way, but this is what history dictates. I mean, I will never be as eloquent as James Baldwin. I will never be as eloquent as Frederick Douglass, as Martin Luther King. Many, many more people who are much, much more eloquent than I was have said the same thing. And folks ain't got it. Folks ain't got it. There will always be some measure of people who can, who actually are interested, who actually really, are curious, who do want to know, right? And so there's some amount of change that can be affected. But I think we really, really need to be clear that there's a certain percentage. When you have, for instance, as was true only 2 or 3 years ago, half of a major political party that believes the President of the United States is a Muslim, that's an interest in not knowing. That's an interest. That's not like you can't. I mean, what can you do with that? That's immune to facts. We had the President of the United States having to, pull out his birth certificate at a press conference. And then the conversation then moving, well, have him, what were his grades? I want to see his grades. See that, you can like drive yourself crazy, by engaging in that. And so I think the first thing is to understand where your limits are. Yes, there's going to be a group of people who you can get, and you hope that you get them. But at the end of the day, writing is great. Writing is awesome. I love writing. I do it. Obviously, it's my profession. But writing alone can't fix this. I don't even know that writing can fix this at all. It plays some sort of small role in this, but it really is beyond the act of a writer to fix this one.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we have time for 1 to 2 short questions.
So mine is more of a comment, and feel free to respond if you like. So one of the things I'm very passionate about is local food systems and permaculture, because one of the big, huge tragedies I feel that millions of Americans suffer from, particularly ethnic minorities, is the huge lack of accessibility to nutritious, healthy food. And because of such, they're plagued with all these very chronic health problems like diabetes, obesity, and whatever, you name it. I mean, just there's a huge, huge problem existing food systems that affect like people, and they feel very disenfranchised as a result. About 3 months ago, I saw this amazing movie which was hosted by the University of Iowa's student gardeners as well as Backyard Abundance. And it talked about basically all these up and starting farms and, you know, especially in like more lower income parts of these big, huge cities. For example, Growing Power, I think, Will Allen. And it was very encouraging to see that happening because it just empowers people, and including some projects where people were hiring individuals who had just gone out of jail or in the juvenile delinquent centers. And it was just very encouraging to see how people were becoming empowered by just simply growing healthy, nutritious food and by having increasing access to that.
I wanted to make a brief comment, just because of some of the stuff that's been said. At times, I feel like I live in a state of just being uncomfortable, like just all the time. And many people may feel that way. Maybe you don't. I'm not originally from here, and so it is difficult from the snow and everything else, and the majority of white people, and so I just feel uncomfortable.
Right?
Yeah. But you know, I think Nyla mentioned it as well. You know, I just don't think enough people feel uncomfortable. I think it goes back to what you were saying as well. I think a lot of people are in positions where they are willing to maintain the status quo, and rightfully so. I mean, you have an interest, like you said, and there's no reason to change that. And I honestly believe from a community building standpoint, it's about applying pressure to people and doing those things. I applaud students that went ahead and marched on the president's office when the Ku Klux Klan statue was there. I mean, I felt some type of way about that. I wanted to do the same thing, so I appreciate that. You know, it's interesting from a political standpoint because when I first ran and I was asking people, you know, what I needed to do, we got down to the truth, the down and dirty of it. And one of the things that was the truth was I could not rely on the black vote to win. That was the truth. And so, I mean, I had to go out to a lot of neighborhoods that I would never be seen in and leave before 5 o'clock and talk to people at their doorsteps about many issues. And I'm probably going to do this, and maybe I'll lose my re-election campaign. I'm not sure if I do decide to run. But there was a young man that came and from the Press Citizen and came to do a story about me running. And my points when I was running at that time were, you know, being a community voice for the minority community, working to get affordable housing for the minority community. I mean, basically, my points were very minority based. Luckily, at the time, that was an obscure, section or whatever the case may be, and I was told that I would need to change that to be more community-minded. And I do understand that from a broader perspective, you do need to, from a city council perspective, make sure you're talking about the entire community. But the unfortunate thing about that is that, again, I mean, I was told to change because there is not the feeling of uncomfortable in anybody else that is in a position of power. And so I urge you to email, phone call, knock on people's doorsteps. People have come to my doorstep, and I live in an apartment that's closed. And go out and do those things and make people feel uncomfortable. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm tired of sitting in council meetings and sitting in meetings and meetings and meetings, being the only one maybe that feels uncomfortable. Because I have other people who want to, and want to make me feel uncomfortable in a good way to make sure work gets done. But I don't think that any other the members of those meetings, those boards, those councils, whatever the case may be, have that same uncomfortable feeling. And so I urge you from a community building standpoint to do that. So.
All right. So we've come to a point where we only have time for one more question. No, I'm sorry.
Chad Simmons, I'm Executive Director of Diversity Focus. I'm going to talk as an alum of the University of Iowa and ask this question. Many people consider that there is not a black community here. When I was in school, graduate school here, there was around 750 black students. So it's good to know that there's around a 83-person increase over the 27 years since I've been back. So the question is for you, and I assume that no one here, or please, is there anyone here that was raised in Iowa that's on the panel? There is one. Fantastic. Two. Fantastic. Here's my question for you. What is it that is your hope in 25 years that you expect to be different then that does not exist now? And if you are working here, my question is, what will keep you here in 25 years? And if you are a student, my question is, what will make you love Iowa the way that you hope and pray that Iowa would have loved you?
That was a great question. I'll just kick us off, I guess. I'm not from here. I'm from Chicago. Yeah, the actual city. So, one thing, and I work here, so I'll answer that. So, one thing I did love about growing up in Chicago, my family grew up in the church. And so I grew up in the church. And so I had a huge community, a village of folks that kept me on the right track, you know. When I didn't listen to my mom and my dad, like, people at church would hold me accountable. And so what I would hope for and what would keep me here is the opportunity for my kids to have that. And I mean, I want to be a parent. And so that's something that I currently don't have, you know. And as a young professional, I'm building relationships. I have relationships with students, but people that look like me and are at the same point in my life, that is kind of non-existent. I don't have a cohort of people at Iowa or in Iowa City that I necessarily feel like I can grow old with. I have a couple friends, but I don't have that sense of community. And when I was introduced to Iowa City, I was like, oh, I was happy. I was gonna be, you know, this is my first job. This is my first job ever. And so I'm starting my career young. And so I would hope that what I would have in 25 years that would keep me here in Iowa City would be a community like that, like my church community, that would yank my kids up, you know, in the street at Old Cap if they saw them, you know, and that's cool, you know, that'd be good for me. A church that I could go back to, or a sense of fellowship, you know, a community center that would help, you know, me when I'm running from job to job and somebody can bring my kids home, you know. That'd be important to me. In Iowa City, I think, we were talking about it today at dinner, and I like Iowa City. I live in the halls right now. I don't have a place, like a home. And we were talking about how much it costs to live in Iowa City, you know, and so I can't wrap my head around trying to live here and pay the amount of money that's expected in Iowa City, but I love Iowa City. I love being able to walk downtown, you know. I don't want to have to live 20 minutes or 15 minutes from a grocery store or have to drive to a grocery, you know what I'm saying? So that type of stuff is important to me. Build up the community in a way that there's not a food desert within 5 minutes of anybody, you know? And so that's important. That would keep me here. The sustenance of staff, you know, supporting staff members. I'm the highest ranking person, black person in my department. You know, and I have a colleague, she's a black woman too, but we are the highest rank, and we're entry-level ass positions. I mean, that's a problem. And so I don't have mentors to help me grow in that way. You know, I have to look outside of that. And I have to look outside of my department. I have to look outside of color lines, you know. But there's a fellowship, a kinship that I wish I had with somebody that was above me 1 or 2 steps. And so that would keep me here, you know. Without that, I feel alone and isolated. And so who wants to be in that place? I don't want that to be for my students. I don't want that for myself. And so if I can find that, or that can be created, then that would keep me. So.
All right, so I have a little bit different perspective. My hometown is actually Brooklyn, New York, and I moved here when I was 7, so I was just old enough to realize that, not here, I moved to Des Moines when I was 7, and so I was just old enough to realize that that wasn't my home. And also I come from a completely West Indian neighborhood. That's my ethnic background as well. And so there were a lot of people that looked like me and who I actually grew up in the same neighborhood that my mother grew up in. So there's like these 2 generations of people who knew my face and knew my name. And when we moved to Des Moines, we moved to an all-white neighborhood, and we were the only family of color on our block, and then the next block over there was one Mexican family, and that was it for people of color in that neighborhood. And then coming up to Iowa City to go to school, like looking at the next 25 years, actually something that Ta-Nehisi Coates said in the student meeting was that this change that we're looking for may not come in our lifetime, and that actually gave me a lot of peace. I think when I entered these activist spaces and I started like being more vocal about my sociopolitics, I expected this, like, in 5 years I want to see this, and in 10 years I want to see this, and in 15 years I want to see this. But like since that talk, like I've felt really comfortable in knowing that I'm doing something good, and what I'm doing means something, but I may not be around to see the fruits of that. So in 25 years, I guess I'm not like concerned about 25 years. I'm happy with what I'm doing right now, and the only thing that could get me to stay in Iowa is the subway system, and that's not going to happen. So. But yeah, in all seriousness, like the climate of this area, Iowa City itself, you know, has this sense of being a liberal town, and I would like to see more honesty about that, because I've lived on this campus for 3 years, and I'm telling you, I've experienced some like real hateful stuff that I've never experienced in the middle of Brooklyn. So I would like, if I want to see anything in 25 years, if there was something else other than a subway system that could make me stay, it would be more honesty about what's really going on here. And I guess the last thing was like what I enjoy here. This networking is pretty good. Yeah, like, you know, once, especially black people around here, once they know who you are and they know what you're up to, like, they'll come around, like Twanda is always around, and that's really awesome. And, you know, see you places and check up on you, and that's you know, without the subway system, I'd stick around for that. That's nice.
So I know there are still some very pressing questions, and unfortunately, we've come to a point where we have to conclude here, but that does not mean the conversation stops. If you go to the website, A Deeper Black Race in America, it's the student life uiowa.edu webpage. There are other ways to continue this discussion and conversation, so I'd encourage all of you to plug into that and more. And if you guys could all, with me, thank all the brave souls up here for participating. And what I'm going to do now is I would like to pass it on to our keynotes here to say a few words before we head out. Thank you to all of our university partners and all the people who helped make this possible. And stick around to hear these last words. And then I know you'll probably see a lot of these people on campus. I can't speak for everyone, but I know most of the panel up here would be willing to continue some of these conversations outside of this stage space. So feel free to reach out to them.